Hey guys, this is Mitch, and we're here to finish up this week of barbarity. We've checked out a little bit of everything that was on offer for Conan the Barbarian comics from the 70s and 80s. And I thought it'd be a good idea to check out a newer book. Not the newest book, of course, because there's always a new Conan book. This one's from 2019. This is Conan the Barbarian, written by Jason Aaron, drawn by Mahmoud Asrar, and with a couple issues by Gerard Zaffino. And just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to support me a little bit as an artist, in the description there's a couple of links. And if you follow the one on my Patreon and subscribe there, that gives you access to everything I do, from the Blood Force pages and the finished comics to these videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, usually a week or so in advance, as well as some Patreon exclusives. And you can also follow me on Instagram. So, we've seen Marvel do a couple of things with Conan books. The first time out, they gave it to a raw rookie who turned into a superstar and then handed it over to their proven superstar with the original Conan the Barbarian comic. Then with King Conan, that originally started off as a John Buscema book and eventually gave it over to a raw rookie to give a shot on. They already had John working on another Conan. They didn't need him on two. You don't want to diffuse the Buscema-ness too much. This one here, they're going to be given to some of their better talents. This one was intended to be a moneymaker. And if you're not sure how to tell these days, I don't know how familiar you guys are. Some of you probably are, maybe some of you not so much. The way you tell these days how much Marvel plans to sell a book is by how many variant covers they have lined up for it. Conan the Barbarian #1 had 19 variant covers. So they were really counting on this one. I don't know how it did. I hope it did well, because it's some excellent stuff. So I'm not super familiar with the creators on this one. I don't think I've ever read anything by Jason Aaron, which is a little surprising, since judging by his bibliography, he's written several thousand comics in the last decade or so. Mahmoud Asrar, I've never heard of before this book. Gerard Zaffino, I knew a little bit, mostly from Instagram, to be honest. And I love his stuff. But it's actually kind of difficult tracking down too many comics by him because he doesn't do work that often. So I'm not going to be going over the history of these particular creators and how they got in this book. We know how they got in the book. Marvel is desperate for cash. And they figured, you know what? Conan always sells if you put good talent on it. So let's go with some big boys and see if we can get the money machine working. So the conceit on this one is the life and death of Conan. It's a 12-issue story. It's complete. But it's not your standard, cliffhanger ending, and then the story continues. It's more standard Conan, where it's episodic, but in this case at least, there's an overarching plot linking all of the issues together, which is a nice change, actually. It's a nice new element. Usually, you just kind of get your episodes, and that's enough. But that being said, I'm never going to complain about getting an extra element like an arc. That's kind of crazy. So, we're going to start off where we should, with the birth of Conan on a battlefield in a pool of blood. That seems appropriate. And we're going to see off the hop that the art is pretty good. You can argue whether it's the equal of something like Buscema or Winsor Smith. Probably not, depending on your tastes. But it's certainly not a steep drop. It's pretty close. This is a nice shot here. I like stuff like this where there's some very subtle framing of the focus of the drawing, which is Conan's mother in this case. Stuff like, the colorist helps, fading out all the background elements and focusing more on Conan's mother herself, and then darkening the severe foreground elements, but also things like having her somewhat silhouetted against the snow here, which separates her from this other layer. That's a nice touch. And so from Conan's birth, we get Conan in his dotage as Conan the King. And maybe a better version of Conan the King than what we got in the comic, Conan the King. I love John Buscema's artwork. And even Mark Silvestri's version, I'm fine with, because it's interesting to look at. But I hate the short haircut and the no beard and, no real accoutrement. He's got to have the full barbarian king look. And what we're going to cut to is in between. So this is how we're going to start our story off. And they're going to let you know right from the get-go, we're not fucking around in this comic. So we're starting off in obviously a gladiatorial pit, where Conan starts off double-page spread, hacking off 2 heads at once. We get a nice big gout of gore. And we also see, just judging by the way Mahmoud Asrar does these motion lines, there's a bit of like a manga influence. This look overall is one that seems to be kind of popular, but at least it's a better version of that look. And there's some nice stuff going on all over, really. You know, you get your Dutch angle. Conan himself is in a pretty twisted position. He's completely torqued. You get the, I mean, even with the blood fountains here, you get some dynamicism. And this element here with the wall kind of helps to just frame everything a little bit. Again, kind of subtly. That's some nice craftsmanship. Conan is stuck in a tournament in Zamora, the city of thieves. And of course, he's making mincemeat out of everybody he comes across. And I get the impression this is more Conan when he's a little bit younger. Maybe like early 20s, mid-20s, around there. As opposed to, you know, when he's an old man at the age of 45. Ahem. And again, an element that gets a little bit overlooked sometimes in Conan is you need that brutality. So Conan and this other big guy here kind of make short work of everybody else in the arena before they have to turn to each other. Because, I mean, that's how it's got to go, right? And we introduce what will be our antagonist here, which is the Red Witch, who's put a glamour on herself to appear a bit more attractive. So Conan and the Islander go at it, and we get some nice introduction of elements of Conan, just in case you're not super familiar, which is, I think, smart, because a lot of people might have heard about Conan. Doesn't mean you've actually read Conan. So we start off here, the Islander gets Conan locked up against the wall and exhorts him that, you know, he should probably pray to his feeble northern gods. And Conan invokes Crom and says, Sumerians don't pray, and even if we did, Crom wouldn't give a damn. And that's an important part of the Conan mythos. Great expression, by the way. Crom is one of the more fascinating elements of the Conan world. I wish there was more about him, really. Crom can be summed up pretty easily. Crom created Sumerians. That's the deal. He's the only god Sumerians worship, and Sumerians are the only people who do worship him. He's worthless as a god because he doesn't listen to prayers, and he finds pleas for help to be insulting because he created them. And he gave them the gift of stubbornness, essentially, just temerity, the unwillingness to ever give up. And that should be enough to get you by in the world. So if you're asking for something else, you're just ungrateful. And Sumerians need that temerity just to survive, because Sumeria is a shitty place to live. It's like far north. The climate is awful. The soil is like solid because it's always frozen. It's tough to farm there. You're constantly under attack by bandits. So Crom had to breed a hardy people to just get by. So he did that, and he's like, all right, leave me the fuck alone. Apparently the only way you're allowed to honor Crom is by, slaughtering your enemy on the battlefield and then building a cairn of corpses high enough that it'll get hit by lightning. Crom considers that an acceptable gesture. So Conan wins against the Islander. The witch who placed all her money on Conan to win tries to collect. And of course, in the City of Thieves, that's probably not smart for an attractive woman. So they're like, no. Right? We're not giving you your money. We'll give you something else. And of course, we're going to see that she can handle herself. Otherwise, what's the point of introducing her? So now she's going to set about trying to seduce Conan. And at this point in Conan's life, it's probably not the most difficult thing to do. Like, he's experienced. If he's like 24, 25, something like that, which I think is probably around the case, then he's already seen more of the world than most people in Hyboria. And of course, she's successful, takes her into his quarters, and immediately we see something isn't quite right. as she digs her fingers into his back and reveals, yep, it was all a glamour. She's a witch after all. Looks a little bit like the corpse woman in The Shining, actually. And there's some poison on her nails, which knocks Conan out, but she's not out to kill him just yet. She drags him down to a sacrificial table, gets a little bit of his blood, and drops it down this hole where there's these bloody roots that spring up. And again, these are some nice shots. It feels like it could maybe do with a bit more dialogue, although she's going on for quite a while, so, you know, we're not going to complain too much. So we find out that she works for the demon Razazel. And for ages, she's been searching for blood strong enough to conjure Razazel back into the world. And these are all the warriors she'd gone through. Nothing's worked up until this point, but she has a feeling about this Sumerian. So really, she's just kind of trying him out. And turns out Conan's blood is exactly what's needed to summon Razazel. So this is the moment she's been looking for. Conan's able to crack the table as she moves in to take more blood. Smacks some of the teeth right out of her head. That's a good start. At which point she's able to summon the corpses to fight for her. But, I mean, you know, this is a Conan comic. So what we're going to get is some good old-fashioned Conan carnage. And hey, look, somebody had an axe. And yep, that's a classic shot. Like, the rendering isn't right there, but in terms of the pose, the composition, that's some Frazetta shit right there. And I mean, that's not exactly scathing criticism. I mean, some goof on YouTube says you don't render like Frazetta. I'm sure most guys are like, yeah, I'll get right on that. Conan's making progress against the army of the dead. The witch is able to take a couple of hacks out of him, though. Tells him that she's foreseen his death in this chamber. Conan goes, yeah, you should have looked a little closer. Hacks her head right off her body. Again, great shot. I do like this artwork quite a bit, actually. I wasn't sold on it at first, partially because of the inking. I'm not a fan of digital inking. But there's enough detail in it. The figure work all has an ease about it that's very nice. And it's still got that hyperkinetic kind of element to it sometimes. Not all the time, but. And Conan himself, he's a leaner Conan. He's not a big mountain of a dude, but he's still got heft to him. This feels like just a correct interpretation of the character. So, leaving Conan, sets the tower on fire, and then we cut to King Conan in Aquilonia, mopping up after a hard day's work. And on the battlefield, he spies a couple of kids collecting corpses for their cart. And King Conan inquires why they would be taking these corpses. And they tell him it's for the glory of Razazel and the coming of the Great Red Doom. And Conan vaguely remembers that name. And at that moment, the bodies explode from the cart. And the corpse of the witch comes flying at Conan. Again, this would be like 30 years later, maybe. And even though she's dead, she's able to put up a pretty good fight. I mean, Conan's able to fend her off fairly reasonably, except he wasn't keeping his eye on the children, which he should have done. And ends up with a couple of knives in his back for his trouble. So from here, they plan to load him in the cart, take him back to the tower, again, 30 years later, so that they can drain him of his blood, and Razazel can rise again. So that's it for issue 1 of this. There's all sorts of Conan comics in the works. This is for the Conan Omnibus. That actually looks like a John Cassidy cover, maybe. I'm not super fond of that. I don't like his Conan. But, that's fine. And there's also a Belit series by the looks of it. I don't recognize any of the creators on that, but what can you do? Okay, so that's Conan the Barbarian number 1. So I'll just give you a quick idea of what else is in this series here. Not the whole series, just the 12-issue story, because the series itself goes for 25 issues. Just long enough that they can claim 300 issues of Conan the Barbarian. Which, yeah, okay. And this just kind of showcases the episodic nature of the book. So, I mean, we just ended the last one with Conan being dragged off to his death, and all of a sudden we're cutting back to him as a pretty young man here, actually. taking on giant serpents in the woods while hunting Picts. And at this point, Conan hates the Picts because they've been killing his compatriots, and he swore revenge. And they're just savages off in the woods. So, why not? So after killing a couple of the giant serpents, they take him back unconscious to their village. They patch him up. And at first, he's shunned by the populace. So, at night, he sharpens his sword. He gets enough food that he's not going to, collapse or anything. And then during the day, he goes out and he kills giant serpents, which the Picts are constantly attacked by. So he starts to earn a bit of respect from the savages, to the point where he's able to work himself into their celebrations and help them build up defenses and eventually fight alongside them. And, it's not an epic story or anything. The more epic story is the overarching arc, really. But this is the kind of thing we're going to get in this series. Like I said, they kill the serpents. They're able to kill the king giant serpent. And at the end of it, the village is no longer under attack. Conan's healed up. He can go back to civilization, in quotes. But he's exhorted by the Pict leader, you know what, you should just stay with us. I can see by your look, civilization isn't for a man like you. You belong out in the woods with us. And in his heart, it kind of feels like Conan agrees, but he ultimately says, you know what, I just don't belong anywhere. I'm not in this for anybody else. I'm in this for me. And this issue ends with him walking by those two grave-stealing children. And this is basically how they're going to show up over the course of the series, as just sort of a background element. Basically that they've always been there. Throughout all of Conan's adventures, ever since he came across the Red Witch the first time, they've been stalking him and waiting for a moment when they can avenge their mother, the Red Witch. This one's fun. At this point, he's just a thief. That's one of the many things I like about Conan, is that he's not a particular kind of barbarian. He's every kind of barbarian. He's mercenary, assassin, he's thief, he's warrior, he's adventurer, he's explorer. So gets captured for being a thief. He's a bit too much Sumerian for this particular tree, which is their sacred tree. Breaks the hanging branch, is able to knock the tree over, so I guess that tree was just about dead. And this is, you can tell by the rendering here, this is when he's very young. And when he's about to be executed, they decide they're not going to try and hang him anymore, they're just going to hack him apart. And right when the executioner goes to raise his axe, gets struck by lightning. So in this world, this would probably be Mitra coming to save him. Mitra is sort of a Christian-esque god. And the end of the book, we get the kids carting off Conan to that tower. It always comes back to that. And really, those are examples of every one of the books, where you get a Conan adventure, but you also get a little bit of story progression on this main arc. This one here is by Gerard Zaffino. Very different kind of artist. And this particular one is, again, when he's older, he's the king of Aquilonia. And civilization is killing Conan. And you can see we've done with the litheness of the younger Conan. This one is all about heft. And really that's Gerard Zaffino's style too, where everything feels thick, everything is pretty heavily rendered. Conan himself is built like a brick shithouse, and they explain what's wrong with him. He's come down with a kind of flu, and what it is that King Conan brought peace to the realm, and now it's killing him. He's just not built for it. One of the ways he tries to alleviate it is to go down to his dungeon, because he has a lion cage down there. He's like, fuck it, open the cage. If it kills me, that's how it goes. And the lion doesn't attack. He tries to goad it by punching it right in the fucking face. But that just kind of helps the lion recognize his own kind. Another cage beast. And stuff like this is just gorgeous. It looks like it's done fairly quickly. Some of the hatching is like just quick ticks, but it feels like Gerard Zaffino's at a point. Gerard Zaffino is the son of, I think, Jorge Zaffino, who was another artist, and actually has kind of a similar style to him, that kind of rough cut feeling. I'm not really familiar with Jorge Zaffino. I did see that he drew, I don't know if anybody remembers the comic Terror Inc. Weird looking comic, kind of gruesome looking, really. I remember even thinking at the time, this comic looks kind of cool, and then never buying it. And I think that was the case with probably a lot of people because it didn't last that long. But yeah, it looks like Gerardo Zaffino. I got the name wrong, my bad. He's kind of carrying on his footsteps. So, in this one, Old King Conan is going to try and alleviate his problems by meting out some vigilante justice. He's heard about a gang of kidnappers hiding out above a tavern in town. So instead of waiting for due process, instead of going down there with the guards, he's actually going to sneak out of the castle at night and just put like a little shroud over his face so he can't be recognized and get down there and slaughter every one of the gang members. Gets back to the castle, a little beat up, but feeling better already. And this becomes his routine, where night after night, his condition actually kind of deteriorates because he's not sleeping. And he needs to get patched up over and over again, but he's become the old Conan again, where he can just push through it because he's Conan. Now, we get lots of nice brutality. Zaffino doesn't skimp. It's some great shots, stuff like this. I really like his use of shadow. Like, even like stuff like this, it's fairly simple, but it's just well executed. And during one scuffle, his sickness catches up with him a bit, except he gets the cavalry coming to his rescue in the form of that lion who he told to stay back, but it listens about as well as he does. And now there's rumors of this giant and this monster patrolling the streets and inciting terror into brigands everywhere. And there's a nice shot to wrap it up with. A few weeks later, Conan brings the lion back out to the jungle and just lets it go, because it deserves it. And we end with, and so Conan resumed his kingly duties, feeling healthier than he had in many years. And great was his reign for many years. Loves he had and loves he lost. Wars were fought, a son was born. Beloved and celebrated was Conan the King, right up until the day he disappeared. And nice shot here to end on. Again, that heavy shadow. There's a lot of black in that picture, and I love it. I'm quite sure Zaffino uses traditional methods for inking, particularly when you see stuff like this. That, again, looks kind of scribbly, but it's a very controlled scribble. And one more quick one. We get Conan when he's gotten a little bit older, and he's coming back to the village he grew up in Samaria. And of course, he returns as a friggin' giant. This is Zaffino again. And everybody's walled in against the storm. And it turns out they're being possessed by the wizard Thoth-Amon, who is kind of Conan's nemesis, although Conan doesn't really know much about him. He just knows every once in a while that name pops up. He doesn't realize that he keeps thwarting Thoth-Amon's schemes for world domination. So Thoth-Amon has possessed the entire village, including his grandmother, the only living relative he has left. And we get Zombie Night in Samaria. And that's just fucking great. There's a lot of texture in that old face. And he's able to hold his own against them, but he doesn't want to kill them. These are still people he grew up with. He does end up killing a few anyway. And this is the one that's kind of controlling this particular herd. And you can tell by the snake in his ear, because Thoth-Amon is a snake wizard, snake sorcerer. And he pushes Grandma a little too hard. Well, she'll take a few hacks out of Conan. She's not going to actually kill him. Taking a few hacks out of your kids or your grandkids, that's just how you toughen them up. And I like this shot of Conan after the fight. And he's got these just gapes in his back from being chopped up. Got a couple of knives sticking out of him. And everyone's just kind of, chuckling and laughing it off at the end of it. Except they also have to worry about the dogs that have been possessed. Only this time, it's Conan and the village against the dogs. And that doesn't last too long. This is Thothamon here. And we, again, just touch base on the Crimson Witch. So that's where I'll end this particular thing. As I said, I'm not gonna go over the entire story, because it is a newer book. I mean, 50-year-old Barry Windsor Smith comics that are all one-shots, yeah, I don't mind spoiling one or two of those. But on a 4-year-old book with what I consider a decent overall story, and, just, like, it's got some great stuff in it, and a pretty cool ending, actually. Like, when I say it's about the life and death of Conan, that's what it is. It touches all over his life, all sorts of different aspects, puts him in all sorts of different situations. And we do touch on the death of Conan, although that's not where we end. For instance, this is issue 11. And if you're wondering what's going on, Conan's facing off against Crom. And this is my favorite issue in the series. If you're going to check this series out, which I recommend, at least try to get to this issue, because it's fucking great. And this team also did a follow-up mini-series. This one's only 6 issues, but it's about Conan the King. And it's essentially Conan's last adventure, where things get settled once and for all with Thothamon. And I just want to pick up as many of these as I can. They're just fun to spend time with. So that's going to do it for this particular series, and that's going to do it for our look at Conan for this week. And Conan comics are something I never read a ton of. I think I probably mentioned. But, I've always had a liking for, and I'm going to spend some time with the comics I have. I haven't read them all. I have a fair bit now. A lot of these I kind of brought in for this particular series. Now I got a shit ton of Conan comics. It's like, man, I can read some of these now. But I mean, if you're not sure where to start, honestly, you could do worse than pretty much anything we've touched on this week. If you like the newer style, this is the one for you. If you're more of a vintage guy, I still recommend those Conan sagas. They're fucking great. Like I said, I'm not familiar with Jason Aaron as a writer. I hear mixed reviews that he does good things on some titles and not so good things on others. I feel like he knocked the character out of the park in this particular series. And the newer King Conan series is reassuring. Just like, no, we're going to keep getting good Conan stories. Good Conan stories aren't difficult to come up with, actually. It's just, and it's a nice kind of tradition in Marvel. It's like, yeah, no, you can always rely on some quality from a Conan book. There's that legacy of greatness, and it looks like they're trying to keep it going, and I appreciate that. So that's going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when the next one's coming out. Comment down below. That helps with the algorithm, apparently. I didn't know that part. Give me your Conan thoughts. That sounds weird. That sounds like I'm trying to steal them. But anyway, back to the important stuff. Go over to my Patreon and subscribe there. That gives you access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff, the pages and the comics, to these videos before they get out to YouTube, usually a week or so in advance, and some Patreon exclusive content. Also, if you follow me on Instagram, I will be dropping some drawings on there at least once a week, I think. And you can DM me for commissions. But yeah, we're done with Conan. If you want to see more Conan, I didn't do enough Conan, let me know. I will go issue by issue on Conan the Barbarian if you like. We'll turn this into the Conan channel, and we'll drive everybody away except for a core of like 8 people. I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. So thanks again. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.